Welcome back to another episode of Simplyrobotix, the podcast, a podcast exploring the animation industry one episode at a time. I'm your host, Monique, and you can find me on all social media platforms at Simplyrobotix, SimplyRobotix. Today's episode is another episode that I've been really excited about. I've been sitting on this episode for like a lot of weeks because I had in mind the right time to release it. So today's episode, I will be joined by THEE Karen Toliver, and she'll be sharing a bit about her career journey and some animated feature films and TV shows that she feels are important to the culture. Now, I'm not going to hold you any longer. Let's get into the episode. Welcome, Karen. Thank you for joining us. I'm so happy to have you, and I also can't believe that I have you here with me spending some time today. Can you tell my listeners just a little bit of where you're from?
Sure. And thanks for having me. I'm excited to do this. Yeah, I grew up, I was born in upstate New York, but when I was 2, I moved to Texas. So I grew up in North Dallas and spent my childhood there. I went to University of Texas at Austin. And then I've been out in LA for God knows how many years, a couple decades or so. But yeah, I consider myself a Californian now. My husband's from LA and been here for a long time. So, but I'm from Texas.
Okay, and we're going to get into, I know we didn't lead off with your position and where you're working and stuff like that, but before we get into that, you do work in the animation industry, and I like to ask my guests, did they go to school for the industry that they're working in now?
Yeah, good question because I absolutely did not. My parents were scientists. So I was like this, I liked theater and music and all that stuff, but I thought I was going to do something, legit. So I was pre-engineering when I was at Barnard, Columbia. But realized I really wanted to be in film. So I kind of worked my way into taking some film classes. I transferred to UT Austin. I did the public access station there, and that's where I really learned like film and television kind of on the ground. And then finally got the courage to come out to California. And again, really thought I was going to be in live action, but I wanted to do movies that lasted. And I found myself having an opportunity to work at Disney feature animation. And I never really thought about animation, but when I really thought about what I wanted and the kind of movies I wanted to sort of land on our culture, I realized that animation couldn't have been a more perfect place because, you watch these movies when you're children and they just live with you for the rest of your life. So absolutely stumbled into it. You couldn't have told me in high school that I would have ended up in animation, but so glad, I got there.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So many times people feel discouraged about getting into the animation industry because they went to school for something else. And it's just so important that, your path is just always like changing sometimes.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like your first job ever, if it was like as a teenager, in college, in relation to your first job in the industry?
You mean comparing my first job ever in
Yeah,
my
like
first job
were
in the
you
industry?
delivering pizzas, working in a library?
Oh, I had well, actually, first job was for my dad. My dad was a scientist, as I said, and he did kind of controversial animal testing in Texas for like hearing and stuff. So the first terrible job I had was cleaning out the cages of the animals that he was experimenting with. So it didn't get any lower than that. And then the first time I got hired, I was working in an ice cream, store. So that was like the first time I got like a paycheck from someone else. And then the first job I got in the industry was I was a PA at this company called Motion Picture Corporation, and I was just running people around, and that was good because I was learning LA as I went. But yeah, that was my first job in the industry.
Okay, and I was, doing my research on you, and I saw that you worked on the Mighty Ducks franchise. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and what that was like for you?
Yeah, so I was an assistant. That was my first. So my first job in the industry was, like I said, I was a PA at the small production company where everybody did everything. My first legitimate job was when I worked at Disney Pictures, and I was an assistant to a creative executive named Julia Dre, and she was the one that was overseeing the Mighty Ducks franchise. And that's when I really learned what being in a studio was like. I really understood the power of sort of being at sort of the mecca of Disney and kind of overseeing, and really seeing a lot of movies come through at first, when I first got to the industry, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to be a producer on that side or freelance or work at the studio. When I got to the studio, I realized, oh, I'd rather worry about what I was making versus, whether I was going to get to make anything. And so, yeah, the Mighty Ducks was one of the first ones that I got to really see that infrastructure of creating movies for families, and just had a really great time and learned so much about that process, and then saw it go out in the world. And, I think it really was the first franchise I'd worked on.